Okay, we're going to start Kuf Lamed Chesem and Beis 138 B Mishnah. Thank Hashem that you're able to learn Torah every day. It's just about learning. We should have the basic English immediately. We're learning the Nishma Savigol Basra Binyamin and Sanas Ben Benzin, and also Refuah Shlema for Avin David Ben Sarah and Gedali gets Elias. Okay. Bracha. Mishnah says, morning. Have Tailesh Michael Chomish Yirtzeh. We're talking about someone that had written a document saying that my inheritance is going to go, not my inheritance, he's giving, it's a gift. He's giving to his son everything. And it was one of these Hayom Malach Maisi that you get the principle now, but I'm still using it until I die. That's what he's saying. Yeah. So now what happens is, using it means that, let's say it's a field or something, so you can take the fruits off it and you can give it to whoever he wants. Have the father that still has the usufruct ownership. He's Taylor Shemaichel Chomish Yirtzeh. He can remove the fruits and he can feed it to whoever he wants because he's still the owner of the fruits he's still retain that. Mashiniach Talash, when after he dies, what happens then? So this is interesting because the actual property, the guf, the basic property, the principle, goes only to one of the sons. But the fruits that he leaves that when he passes away should be divided up by all the inheritors. The fruits were not part of the gift. It's only the gift was only the property. Fruits belong to the father. When the father passes away, those fruits that belong to him now need to be distributed to all the inheritors. Well, Mashinich Talosh, what's left that's not attached to the property, that gets distributed to all the inheritors equally. Not just to the one that he gave the gift to, right? Not just the one that owns the field. Gemara elaborates on this. It says, Talosh in what was separated from the property gets distributed to all the inheritors. That's correct, yes. Mechubar, but what's attached to the property, what's attached to the property, even though it may be ripe, but it's ready to be harvested, maybe, it still belongs to the son. Because it wasn't removed. It's considered part of the property. Well, that's a little bit of a problem, but Tanya, because it was taught in a brisa on top of Kuf Lamed Tes. What we're doing is we're quoting a Sefta in Ksubas that if a son sold his side of the property, in other words, this was the father that wrote to the son, I'm giving you this property from now until after I die, and after I die, which means that he's giving him the principal now and the fruits the father's retaining for himself. Now the son goes ahead and sells the property. Okay. So what happens? The son sold the property, so the purchaser can't really use the property, right? Because the father is the one that's using it while he's alive. The son sold the property while the father's alive. Then the father dies. So this purchaser is like, yes, I can go in and take the property. Well, you can take the property, yeah. What about the fruits that were attached to the property? Whose are they? Do they belong to the son? That's what it looked like in the Mishnah, because the only one that gets inherited to everyone was if it's separated off the property, but the fruits that are still attached to the property, in the Mishnah, belong to the son. Over here it says, that the lekeach, the one that purchased the property from the son, there's fruits attached. You have to evaluate those fruits, and he has to distribute them to their value to the inheritors, which means the ones that are attached are not considered part of the good. It's exactly the opposite of what we learned in the Mishnah. fruits that are attached to the property, do they belong to the principal or do they belong to the prophet? In the Mishnah, they belong to the principal. In the Brisa, they belong to the prophet. They're going to be distributed to the inheritors. Amarula says like kasha. It's not a question. We can answer this up easily. Question is, are we dealing with he's giving it to the son or is he selling it to someone else? This is like a Meicher B'ayin Yafa type of discussion. How generous is a person when he sells? So it says, if the son is selling it to an outsider, so he's not selling him the fruits that are attached to the property. When the father is giving him a gift, giving a gift to the son, he's giving it to him generously. He's giving him even the fruits of the property that belong to him, right? If it's attached, it belongs to that son. When the son is selling it to an outsider, he's not selling what's attached to the property. It depends on what type of relationship they have, how generous it's going to be in the sale. He bought a field, right? He bought the field. He bought the field. Okay, now he owns the field. Now there's someone that's taking the fruits from the field, right? So if there's labor involved, you're asking if there's labor involved, who would get that? Probably the one that's working, one that's taking the fruits is going to do the labor. No, but the fruits never changed owners. One that's taking home the fruits is going to put labor in to get the fruits. No, the fruits belong to the inheritors, right? That's what we just said. So it's basically the one that. Sorry. Yeah, it's considered theirs. The person that was growing them was paying for that the whole time. He was one taking the fruits. He's maintaining it. Right? It wouldn't be the other way. Yeah, it wouldn't be the other way. It wouldn't be the guy. The guy is going to own the field, maintains it, and someone else takes all the profits. The person is growing it and is picking up the fruit. Good. Then it changes. Like he wasn't able to pick up any fruits in one person passed. Now the buyer took over. Now you talking about there's a third person taking the fruits? No. No, there's no third person there. Right? Okay. The next Mishnah. Are the slaves part of the property also, or are they like inheritance? Slaves are inherited over if it's a non-Jewish slave. The next Mishnah is not continuing where someone gives part of the property to he's giving a gift to while he's alive and takes it after he's died. We're just talking about a regular inheritance here. Let's say the father passed away and he left sons, children that are mature and children that are minors. We don't allow the older children to come in and to take from the estate for their clothing. Right? And the explanation for that is because the mature children's clothing is going to be much more expensive than the younger children's clothing. It's not going to be fair. Just because they're older, they come in, they're going to take much more. And the same thing is the opposite. We don't let the younger children, their food, and it means food and care, is more expensive than the older people's food. Older people's food is not as, I don't know, I would assume they eat more, but the care that goes into it is going to be more expensive for the children. So the adults are not provided for by using the funds of the minors. Right. Which means they can't take from the state. Rather, so what do? We divide up. This is a time where we have to make sure that we divide the estate right away. And the older children want to buy clothing. Okay, here's the money that you're allotted that comes from the estate, and the children need food. Okay, this is their money that comes from the estate, and that's we separate it like that, and that's how they spend the money. Nasu hagdailim. If okay, the Gemara is gonna try to figure out what this part means, but let's say in the conclusion we'll do the spoiler alert. Nasu hagdailim yisu aktanim. If the older children got married and that wedding was expensive and they took it from the estate, so then yisu aktanim, then the younger children can also take from the estate. The imamru ktanim. And if the children, the younger children say, we would like to get married the way you got married. Ain't shame on them. We don't listen to them. What the father gave was given. Now, the explanation for this, the way the Gemara is going to explain it, is that there's two separate cases here. One is if after the death of the father, the older children got married and they spent $10,000 on the wedding, then we have to spend $10,000 for the younger children's wedding, right? They have to make it fair, even though it's coming from the estate and it wasn't divided up yet. If the older children were married while the father was alive, and the father made this massive wedding and spent $100,000 on the wedding, now the younger children are getting married. They say, okay, let's take from the estate. You had a big wedding in I don't know, botanical gardens, so we're also gonna make a big wedding somewhere like that. So we say no. When the father was alive, that's over. We don't compare anything to that. The only thing that you can compare to is what was taken from the estate after the death. What the father gave them while he was alive, that's nasan. That's finished. We don't use that in the equation at all, just because there was a big wedding beforehand. Let's say there were no sons, just daughters. Okay, exactly like we learned before with the sons, that we don't let the older children take money for their clothing from the estate and then tell the younger children, well, you don't really need such fancy clothing, right? You can wear pajamas all day, and that wouldn't be fair. So we don't allow them to separate like that, like everyone takes what they need. That doesn't work like that. And we don't take the child care and all of that from the estate for the children, for the minors. For the firstborn, yeah, the Bechor is a different story. Here we're not talking about oldest. We're talking about older than 13 and younger than 13, or something like that. Right?
Before doesn't take effect if he's under certain.
Yeah, we're not discussing the dividing up of the property. We're talking about when the property is still as an estate and it hasn't been divided yet. Now everyone's coming and say, well, I need this, well, I need that, well, I need this, right?
Oh, okay.
And so that we don't allow them to do this because they're at different ages. Each one is going to end up taking from the estate, and then when they're going to divide it up later,
off the estate.
Living off the estate, right? So now we're talking about where it's daughters and no sons, and we're saying that it's exactly the same story, that the daughters are going to inherit when there's no sons, right? You learned that if there's no sons, the daughters divide the estate, but they can't start taking what they need before the division. They have to divide it equally. If the older ones made a wedding, so then the younger ones can make the same size wedding. And if the younger ones say, we want to get married the same way you got married, which was a big, huge wedding, so then ain't shame in them. We don't listen to them because that was while the father was alive. That's the way we learn.
Daughters live off the estate regardless. I think once they get married.
Yeah, we're going to see that in a minute. Yeah. It turns out that there is one difference between if there's only sons there, if there's sons and daughters, or if there's only daughters. What's going to happen is that if there are sons there, then the daughters actually take their sustenance from the estate, and the sons get the rest of the inheritance. However, if the entire inheritance is going to the daughters because there are no sons, then then they can't start taking from the estate their needs. Then you have to divide it up before they start taking what they need. So it's going to come out different if there's the way they're taking their sustenance from the estate, if it's only daughters or if it's sons and daughters. Looks like they're going to be able to get a better deal if they're sons and daughters regarding their sustenance, right? But they'll get the whole estate if there's no sons. That's the story.
Does the obligation for Nizonos on the girls, the minor girls, the daughters, does that end when they reach bas mitzvah?
Yeah, that's only until they become Baigaris.
Bogeris, so that's when they're 12 or 13.
Or if they get married.
Yeah. So you can figure out the time limit on how long
Right.
you have to support the girls. So I'm just trying to figure out how you know how much to set aside to subtract from the estate for that. But I guess if the wife decides that she wants to take support rather than her kasuva,
And you have to factor that in as well.
you don't know how long that's going to go on, so you don't know what you really can distribute.
Right. I think after 25 years, I think the children can say enough is enough.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no. I remember that. You're right.
They just give her the ksuba, I think. Something like that. Okay. I don't think so. I don't think she can live. Was there a limit on how long? Besides for those 25 years, was there a limit on how long can she live there, even if the ksuba? Can she end up taking from the state more than the ksuba? I think so. I think the ksuba is just one son. It's not deducted. She wants to live on the estate.
I remember a discussion in which the heiress said that the old wife was eating too much and costing them too much money from the estate. I don't remember how the halakha came out, but I remember the discussion.
Yeah, it seems familiar from Ksubas. Okay, Amar Rava says, Hi, Gadol, Achi, the Labash Vichsi mi Besa, my Da'avad Avad. If this older brother, one of the inheritors, takes from the estate clothing, and he money, and he buys himself clothing, it's already over. My Da'avad Avad. We don't make him like pay it back. He wasn't supposed to do that. He did it. That's okay. Now the explanation for that is because there is a benefit to the inheritors if this person looks like a professional, because he's dealing with the property, this and that. They want people to take him serious, and if he's dressed properly, then people see he's a respectable person, and they take him serious, which is good for all the brothers. It's these people that take from the company for their fancy car and the designer clothing, and they say, "What do you mean? I have to represent the company. Can't show up in a Toyota Corolla. I need a Rolls Royce, right? Look like this is official, right? Dress for success." So Vanan Tanan. But 1 second, what we learned in the Mishnah, that they're not allowed to do that. It says Masnisin b'sharcha. Our Mishnah is talking about a sharcha, which is an idler, which is a guy that doesn't have a job and he's not doing anything. That's why he's not allowed to take his clothing from the estate, because there's no benefit for that. Whereas a sharcha pshita, I need a Mishnah to tell me that he can't take his clothing if he's not. There's no benefit to that. Well, Ma'odatem, I could have thought nichalei d'lei navel. I still don't want him to look like look disgusting. It's not good for the family image. If one guy that's in the olden days, the Machanayim books, those little, someone that's poor, so they dress him up in tatters, like the bottom of his pants are like, the hem is like in his holes, and so it's so you look poor. It wasn't just you go to Marshalls, you look the same.
So it wasn't
right.
in those days. They were more
wealthy. Right. Okay, now we come to this part of the Mishnah that we already spelled it out what it means, but the Gemara has to go through this. I explained it based on the end of the Gemara. If the older children made a wedding, so then the younger children make a wedding from the estate. My Kamar, what do you mean to say? Because afterwards it says that they can't say that. Amar Rav Yehuda Achikam. It really, I think should be a chulu here, because the Mishnah goes on. It says, and if the younger ones say, we'd like to make a wedding like you made, we say no. So my Kamar, what does that mean? Amar Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda explains this. Achikamar. If the older children made a wedding after the father passed away, then the younger children can make the wedding after the father passed away. But if they made a wedding while the father was alive, and then the younger ones say after the father dies, we'd like to make the same type of wedding that you made several years ago when the father was alive. We don't listen to them. What the father did, that's a different story. Now it's a new era in their spending. If there's only daughters here, no sons, I'm on Kuf Lamed Tes, middle of the page, right? Shalach le'avua bar Geniva le'Rava. It's interesting. The son's name is Avua. Avua, the son of Geniva, says to Rava, Ilamdeinu Rabbeinu, teach us our master. Love Sava Achla. If a woman borrows money and she consumes 14 bags of she consumes what she got the unpaid version of Shas.
Yeah, exactly.
Love Sava Achla. If she borrows money and then she consumed. So va'amda v'nasas bal like keachavi ayerushavi. Then she gets married. So what happens to the to that debt that she has credit card debt, right? And she gets married. Can the credit card companies, right? The collections, can they come to the husband and collect her debts now? Because the husband gets her property in a certain way. There's a discussion in the Rishonim if this is talking about after she dies, or if it's talking about even while she's alive. There's different ways of learning this Gemara, but let's leave it vague. Yeah, it seems like the Rashbam takes it as both. Bein b'chayeh, bein lachem misa. The question is like this: Is the husband considered a purchaser of this wife? Do we view him as a lekeach, that he's purchased the property, like a brand new owner? And a creditor can't come to the new owner. Well, there's two ways of this. This is if it's a milva b'shtar, if the debt had a document, credit card wouldn't be the good. If there was an IOU, there was a promissory note. So then they can take that promissory note to the purchaser of the property and actually extract the debt. They can make a collection from the purchaser. You said there's a lien on that property that you bought because of the debt. But we're talking about not with the promissory note, just a verbal agreement, a verbal document. It was just without any a verbal loan, without any document. So it's called a milva al peh. That you can't collect from purchased property. There's no lien on the property if there was no note. So she has borrowed money without a document. So now, if the husband is considered an inheritor, then the creditor can come in and say, well, you inherited the estate, you owe me money, I'm collecting. But if the husband is considered a purchaser, then there's no lien on the purchased property, and the creditor can't come in and collect. So the question is, what's the husband considered? Baal lekeach avi or yerush avi? Is the husband considered a lekeach, a purchaser? Is he considered an inheritor? And the Gemara elaborates. It says lekeach avi. If we say he's a purchaser, milval paying or give him minal kuchas, then a loan that has no document, you can't collect from a purchaser. There's no lien on that property. Or perhaps Yerush Havir, maybe he's an inheritor, and you can collect from the estate if it's a milval, even a milval. So Amrlei, this is Rava responding to Abu Abarknivi, he said, Tanina, we learned it in the Mishnah. Nasu Gedolos, Yisuktanis. If the older ones got married, then the younger ones can also get married. My love, now he's reading this Mishnah very different than the way we read it. We read it as the rights to the estate. He's reading it. Doesn't this mean Nasu Gedolos Labal? If the older ones got married to husbands, which means that the property that they when they got married, they took the property from the estate, and now it goes to their husbands. Yisuktanes mibal. That means that the younger ones that want to get the money from the estate, but the estate is already in the hands of the, I guess it wasn't divided up, maybe. The estate wasn't in the hands of the it wasn't in no one's hands. It went from the older children's hands to the hands of their husband. So they want to come and take it out of the husbands to get money for their weddings. And we're saying that they're able to. Obviously, they're not considered like a lekeach. They're considered like a yerush. They're considered like an inheritor. Now, why did they end up with why did their husbands, the older ones' husbands, end up with the property more than the younger ones? Obviously, the property wasn't divided up. That's clear. Okay, anyway, the Gemara rejects this pshat in the Mishnah. The Gemara says, "Lie, that's not the pshat. Nasig Gedolos Labal. We're not talking about extracting money from the husband here. We're saying Nasig Gedolos Labal. If the older ones got married to a husband, Yisuktanos Labal, then the younger ones can get married to a husband. Not talking about Maybal. There's a difference from the husband or Libal to a husband. Just like the older ones got married, the younger ones can also get married. We're not talking about extracting money from the older ones. So we know this was like a misreading of the Mishnah. The Gemara says, Aini, is that really the pshat in the Mishnah? Vatani Reb Chia, but Reb Chia taught in a brisa, Nasig Gedolos Labal, Yisuktanos Mibal. The opposite, that they do take exactly that way that we said before. That if the older ones got married, and the property went over to their husbands, because when they get married, property goes to the husbands. So at least the usage of it, right? So now the younger ones can go in and extract from the husbands, which means that the husband is considered like an inheritor. Yeah.
More similar than they could give. They're only running for about a give. They give it to the giver. They make sure that it's free and clear because it's like generous gift. But then when they're selling,
yeah, but these are the two options, because the reason why the husband gets the property is because he has certain obligations to his wife. So it's not a gift, it's in exchange for obligation. It's a purchaser. On the other hand, though, it also could be as an inheritor because of their wedding, marriage. Right? There's different ways of looking at it. So the Gemara says, Dilma Shani Parnasa the Isli Kala. Gemara says, well, there may be over here, according to the way Reb Chia is learning it, we may be able to consider the wedding or the sustenance that comes from the, how are they going to translate Parnasa? Financial support. Parnasas Nefsuin. It's the financial support for the wedding. The financial support for the wedding has such a rumor about it. There's so much talk about it that it's considered like a lien on the property. It's considered a milva shtar, which means that even if the husband is considered a purchaser, even if the husband is considered a purchaser, but he should have known that there's a lien on the property because he's going to need to pay for this for the younger sister's weddings, right? So we're asking, how could he be? The question is he really considered is he considered a inheritor, or is he considered a purchaser? Well, it turns out that he's paying for the younger's wedding. That means that there's a lien on the property. It means he must be an inheritor. We said, no, he's not necessarily an inheritor. There's a lien on the property because it's a milva b'shtar. There's no shtar. Yeah, but there's everyone knows about it. That's considered like a shtar.
Excuse me, I'm confused as to why the husband has this obligation. If the older sister had a big wedding while the father was alive, that's kind of too bad for everyone else because that was a gift from her father.
Right.
If she was paid for by the estate, then everybody has the right to the same distribution.
Right.
From the estate. So what's the argument about?
So that was one reading of the Mishnah. One reading of the Mishnah is that if the older one got married, then with a certain cost, so then that the rights to that should be for the younger ones as well, to spend that amount of money from the estate. That's one reading of the Mishnah.
Yeah, when the older one's wedding was paid for by the estate.
By the estate, right?
Yeah.
That's one reading of it. That's our first reading of the Mishnah, and that's what we thought it meant. Comes along Reb Chia and tells us, no, the reading of the Mishnah goes like this. If the older one got married and brought in the estate to her husband's rishus, right? Then the younger ones, that when they want to take their money for their weddings, they can take it out from the husband's, from the property of the estate, which apparently is somehow in the husband's rishus. They can extract that now.
So it seems that somehow this estate ended up in the hands of the older sister.
Yeah. Now that's not so clear why.
Maybe she was the administrator and just took it.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's still in the Tfusa Sabayas. I guess it's still in the estate, and she's going to go and extract it now.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, thank you.
How could they extract? Well, we say that that's because it's considered a document. Okay. Amalei Rav Papa Rava. Rav Papa says to Rava, it's not so clear what you're saying. To say that he's considered a purchaser and it's considered a document, and that's why you can extract it. Because Lavhaina de Shalach Rabin Bigarti, is this not what Rabin sent in a letter? Rabin was the traveler. He usually came to Bavel and he brought halachas from Rabbi Yechanan. But over here, he also sent letters. Recently, we also had a letter from Rabin, no? We had it a few days ago. Misha Mace, someone that passed away, Veniach Almana, he left a widow, Ubas Almanusai, and also a daughter of his Ubas. You have to put a comma there. He left a widow and a daughter. Almanusai, his widow, Nizanis Minachasav. She lives off the estate, and that's where she gets her sustenance from. Nisas Abbas, if the daughter gets married, Almanusai Nizanis Minachasav, then the widow has to live off because the daughter inherits. The wife doesn't inherit. Wife just lives off, the widow just lives off the estate. And now the daughter is going to take this property. The daughter takes the property, and it ends up in her husband's jurisdiction. So now the widow is living off the daughter's, off the son-in-law's estate, right? Mesa Habas, let's say the daughter now dies. Now, who owns the estate? The husband. It went from the father to daughter to the husband, because the husband inherits his wife. So Amar Rabbi Yehuda ben Achaisis showed Rabbi Yossi ben Chanina. Rabbi Yehuda, who's the nephew of Rabbi Yossi ben Chanina, he says this is an Amira. He says Al Yadi Hayamaisa. We actually had a story like this. Vamro, and they said Al Menusin Ezenis Menachasav, that she, the widow, gets her sustenance off the estate of the son-in-law, because from that. Now, if you say that he's an inheritor, then we understand why he's paying for this, because he's just inherited the estate, which is good. That's why the widow, his mother-in-law, is living off the estate. But if we say he's a purchaser, why should the widow be living off the estate of a purchaser? Right? Once it's sold, you can't go to the purchaser and say, I'm supposed to be living off this. Amar Abaya says, he loved the Shalach Ravin anan layadinan. If Ravin didn't tell this to us, we wouldn't have known it. But obviously, what we see over here is that the husband is considered an inheritor. Okay. But we learned in the Mishnah, Elu hein shein chesen b'yovel. When it comes to the yovel, to the 50th year, so if purchased property, it goes back to the original. You can only basically lease it for 49 years. So these are the things that don't go back. They stay in this possession. And one of them is habachayra. See, brothers, we're following this opinion that brothers that divide an inheritance are considered purchasers. They have to be divided after 50 years. However, the firstborn portion is not considered an inheritance. It's not considered part of the division. It's considered a gift. So the firstborn portion ends up staying by that brother even after they have to redivide it after the 50 years. Does that make sense? Sounds a little crazy that every 50 years they're dividing. Let me see what there's a note.
Allow them to reassess that division.
Only sold property returned to its original owner in the Jubilee year, whereas the portion of the firstborn is considered a gift that he granted by the Torah. So what would they do? These properties not return to the original Jubilee years. The portion of the firstborn, it does not return to the common ownership of the brothers to be shared equally like the rest of the inheritance, but rather remains in the possession of the firstborn. It sounds like they have to redivide it every 50 years. But that would go...
Law work.
That would go...
Lawyers.
That means you get paid twice.
I know, I love it. Two estate fights.
So, okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is v'hayirish and someone that inherits from his wife. It doesn't go back. We said that when it doesn't go back to that family, it's now in a new family. It's now in the husband's family. What we see now is that the husband is not considered a purchaser. The husband is considered an inheritor. So if the husband's an inheritor, then before we said, yeah, but even if the wife passed, the husband is considered an inheritor, right? Doesn't go back to the... I'm not sure if it's going to make a difference. But either way, it wouldn't go back to the brothers, right? Now, there's no brothers here if she has property, right? Because of women brother. So you told me that without Ravin saying that he's an inheritor, we wouldn't know. He says, I knew this anyway, right? It says, we know that he's an inheritor because if it would be a purchaser, then it would have gone back to the family of his wife's family after the Yovel. Amalei Rava, Bashta the Shalach Miyadina, and you think it's so clear, even after Ravin sent it? This is like he's getting attacked from both sides. First of all, we don't need you because we knew it anyway. And second of all, you're not correct. So, and this doesn't really work. But Ha'amar Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina was Amira, like a student of Rabbi Yechon, and he says, B'usha Eskino, there was an institution in Usha. Isha Shemachrav Nichsim Malog B'chaya Baila. If a wife decided to sell her own property that she brought into the marriage. Now, the purchaser of this property is not necessarily going to end up with his purchase, because if the husband passes away, then the sale is going to be valid. She's selling the property. If the husband passes away first, then that sale is going to work. But if she passes away first, then the guy that purchased it is not going to get anything. It's going to go to the husband because he's the real owner, right? So the rule is like this. The guy that bought it, he says, and then she dies, put that comma there, then the husband can go and take it away from the purchaser, and he doesn't get anything from that whole purchase. It was like a gamble. So how could he take it away from the purchaser? Only if he's considered a first purchaser. I bought it first. If he's an inheritor, then you don't get an inheritance until the death. And if it was sold, you can't go to people that bought property and say, how could you buy that property? I'm an inheritor. So, well, I bought it when he was alive. Now here, it's she when she was alive. So obviously the husband can't be an inheritor if he's able to extract it from a purchaser. He must be a purchaser, and his wedding, when he got the property, right, preceded the sale of that. So he must be a purchaser. If it's an inheritor, then it's only inherited after the death. If it's a purchaser, then it's from the wedding. So obviously
I'm a little confused here. If you'll let me ask a question.
Yeah.
So when they get married, he has the right to the Peros.
Right.
He can work the land out. Can she sell that right?
No,
No, she can sell the goof, but she can't sell the Peros.
She can, right. She can sell the goof. So when she actually did sell it.
Okay.
The purchaser is waiting for the husband to die, and then the sale is going to be complete, and the purchaser will get it. But that was a gamble. That was a gamble. If she dies first, then the husband goes and takes it out. So, but how does the husband take it out if he's an inheritor? An inheritor will only come later. It must be he's considered a lekeah, a purchaser, and he purchased it. His purchase preceded the sale of his wife to that other person. Okay, so now we have a contradiction. What's the husband considered? Ravashi says, Baal, when it comes to a husband, Shavina Rabbanan Kiyeris, the rabbis considered him an inheritor, Shavina Rabbanan Kalekech, and they considered him a purchaser. Whatever's good for him, Avdule, that's what they did for him. Gabi Yoivel, when it came to the, they play it from both sides for his benefit. When it comes to the Yoivel, the Jubilee year, so Shavina Rabbanan Kiyeris, they considered him like an inheritor, Mishum Seidadidei, because they don't want him to lose out. He's not an inheritor. He's a purchaser, would go right back to her family. Gabi de Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, when it comes to the case of Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, where we said that if she sells the property, he could extract it. So Shavin Rabban Kalekeya, we consider him like a purchaser, Mishum Seder Didei, because of his loss. We don't want him to lose out from inheriting his wife. So we consider him like a purchaser, so he gets it. Gabi de Ravin, when it came to the case of Ravin, where the widow is going to eat off his estate, we consider him like an inheritor. Shavin Rabban Kiyerish, even though it's not to his benefit, but Mishum Seder Almana, because we don't want the widow to lose out. So Shavin Rabban Kiyerish, we have to take the widow into account, right? You can just take the husband into account. We took the widow into account, and the husband's considered like an inheritor, so the widow can still eat off that estate. 1 second. You're always worried about the other party. If you're worried about the widow, then we should worry about the purchaser. So let's consider him. You said that he was a lekeach. We should consider him like a yirish. And then we shouldn't be able to extract it. Why be worried about the purchaser? It says no. They made their own loss. The purchaser. If there's a husband, this fellow shouldn't have purchased the property while she's married. So you know that there's other people involved here. It's his own loss, right? He should have taken that into account. Okay, so we're not worried about the purchaser. Is that a new parak? Should we go a little further? Or should we leave it
Further.
Let's go a drop further. We'll do to the bottom. Misha Mace. Person passed away, and he left sons and daughters. If there is a large estate, then Habanim Yershu, sons inherit. and the daughters would just get their sustenance from the estate, from the sons, what the sons are taking, but they don't get their own portion. If there's a very small estate, daughters will get their sustenance from the estate. And abanim, the sons, will have to knock on doors and to collect. Adman says, Adman was a sage in the time of the Rabbi Gamliel, which is right before the destruction. He says, in Ksubis, we had Adman a lot. It says, Bishvil Shani Zachar Ipsadati, because I'm a male and now I lose out, now I have to go knock on doors, I don't get anything. I'm Rabbi Gamliel, Rayani Estibri Adman. Rabbi Gamliel says, it seems like Adman is right. Kama Merubin. What does it mean, a large estate? If everyone could have, if there's enough sustenance for everyone for 12 months, that's considered a large estate. We'll divide it up to the sons and we'll let the daughters just get their sustenance. Now, this was a statement from Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rav. Rabbi Yehuda is a student of Rav. However, Rav passed away and Rabbi Yehuda goes to Shmuel and he tells over statements that he heard from his first teacher. Shmuel, he says, Amar, when he said it over to Shmuel, Shmuel said, well, Zu Divri Rabbi Gamliel bar Rebbe, this is the law according to Rabbi Gamliel bar Rebbe. This is one of Rebbe's sons in the second chapter of Pirkei Avos. We have Rebbe's son, Rabbi Gamliel. But the sages say differently. Not just 12 months, until they reach maturity, which is until they're 12 years old. It's Marnami. We also have a statement because of Rabban Am Rabbi Yechanan, Ramilam Rabba Barbachanam Rabbi Yechanan. The name of Rabbi Yechanan, Kol Shizan Elam Me'elu Ad Shibagru, Hein Merubin. If there's enough money there to support the children until they reach maturity, that's considered a large estate, and then it's divided up by the sons. Bachas Mikan, if it's less than that, Re'ela Motin, and it's considered a small estate. Bilekal Elo Ad Shibagru, Shakil Labaneskulu. 1 second. What you're saying is if they don't have that amount of money, so the daughters take everything, and the sons don't get anything, but they have enough for 3 years, for 4 years, 5 years, and now the sons don't get anything, and the sons have to knock on doors, and you leave it all for them. Rabba says, what you need to do is like this: the daughters take what they need and they put it into an account. That's what they're going to need until they reach maturity, and then the sons take all the rest. That's the way it would be divided. Okay, let's leave it.
But if it's less than 12 months,
Oh, if it's the opposite. You would just take out whatever it is. Right?
it would be less.
It would be less. Yeah.
Good job, everybody.